Welcome back, everybody, to Buckeye Bar Guys here on Buckeye Bar Talk. I'm Mike.
And I'm John.
It's playoff week. We're just a few days. It's Sunday before the game. So here we are 5 days now till
because it's on Friday.
kickoff. So Friday evening, another night game. It's going to be a late one on New Year's Day. So, I mean, I guess it's a good thing. People who might be up late for New Year's Eve can at least sleep in some on New Year's Day.
It's going to be a late one. I think it's 8 o'clock's the kickoff. So originally I saw 8:45, but now everything I'm seeing says 8. So hopefully it gets moved up a little bit.
I think that's all pregame because I don't think the Rose Bowl kickoff's till 5. So that probably will be ending like right at. It'll probably be more like 8:45.
Yeah, and you never know with those playoffs how long everything takes.
I think they put into the start times are when they start the foot.
I mean, I hope with everything being so different with COVID this year that they can at least like kind of condense some of all the pregame and postgame or pregame and halftime stuff.
Yeah,
we don't need all that.
Yeah.
You don't need all that jazz. Just get to the football.
I think the ESPN talking heads need the 45 minutes.
Oh yeah, they need their time to talk. Yes. I know this. Yeah.
So, but yeah, so we get the playoffs this week. So today's episode, I think we're just going to focus just strictly on Clemson. About our game, we want to go kind of position by position to talk about their guys versus our guys, and who do we think at the end of the day has the better shot here. So
and we're going to do a full like preview also though later on in the week before the game, kind of like doing our normal previews that we do. Yeah. So today's more of like a breakdown. It's something we haven't really done, but it's more so just kind of focusing, like you said, mostly on Clemson, but also how Ohio State matches up as well.
Yeah. Just so before we quickly get in, everybody had a good Christmas.
Oh yeah, Christmas was great.
It was Jackson's first one.
Little guy loved it. I mean, he liked eating the wrapping paper, so I think that's normal. I heard that. Hopefully that's normal. But yeah, he was more into the putting the wrapping paper in his mouth than the actual gifts. But it'll get more exciting for him as the years go on.
Yeah. So Christmas was good. We all had a good time. Sadly, not be able to see everybody for a long time. I mean, we did get to spend some Christmas Eve together, just us as a small group, but
we had Manhattans and old fashioned, so it was a good night.
Yeah, so we had fun. All right, so let's get into this. So I think we'll go players all the way down, so all position groups, and then at the end of it, I say we'll kind of just do a Dabo versus Ryan Day.
Okay. And I mean, I got some stuff also just like statistically about the actual position groups themselves, or the actual, side of the ball, like offense and defense I want to touch on.
Okay. All right. So first obviously we'll start with the quarterbacks. It's the most important part of the important position on the field. Easily the most important position in all of sports. So you got Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, arguably the number one right now, and two players in this draft coming up. I mean, there's some wavering on Fields, but I still think that he's at the end of the day is probably going to be number 2 taken. So I mean, I think the biggest things obviously we saw a lot about Trevor Lawrence last year. Now, kid's got a big arm.
He does.
Didn't kill us last year with his arm. He killed us with his brains, finding open receivers in the middle of the field, and then on his legs, and keeping plays alive, and obviously the big touchdown run. So I mean, just your general thoughts. What do you think about what is his bet? What does he do well, and how is he really going to stress Ohio State?
Trevor Lawrence is incredibly talented. Like you said, he has arm strength that Justin Fields does not. Justin has a good arm, but Trevor Lawrence, he can stretch the field in a hurry. He can make every throw on the field. He can throw across his body from a far hash to a sideline, and he can still get it to a receiver. So he does have a tremendous arm, quick decisions. Now I've looked at a lot of it though. I don't know how much of it is, quick decisions as opposed to design plays that's the first read, that because they're, Sweeney and the offensive coordinator, they're seeing what the defense is doing and they're trying to hit them real big. So right now though, I mean, he hits big plays down the middle of the field, and he does a lot of that in the RPO game. So that's a lot of the attention is drawn onto him and ETN, and those slot receivers and the tight ends, they feast on that, and they can get behind their guys in a hurry, and that's where he makes a lot of guys pay. So a lot of that, a lot of hitting people with space, and they they beat the safety or whomever to the end zone. I've saw a lot of that this year. So yeah, he can make every throw. And of course, his legs are deadly. So he doesn't take a lot of time before deciding to run the ball. He's all out effort player. I mean, if you looked, I think it might have actually been that last game against Notre Dame that he pitched the ball or he did an inside handoff to ETN and he was a lead blocker for him. So, I mean, the kid doesn't care. I know everyone likes to give him a hard time, sunshine, that he cries, he pretends to be hurt, and he gets guys kicked out for targeting, which I don't know how true some of that is. I mean, I have seen him twice go down for targeting, and then he's like bounced back up after that person got kicked out of the game. So maybe there is some truth to that, but he's a competitor. He does not care about getting hit. He will lower his shoulder as a lead blocker. He'll lower his shoulder when he's running the ball. So I mean, the kid, he does everything he can to try to get extra yards. And yeah, I mean, him and Amari Rogers, it's been special. And it's been a little bit different this year than what they've done with other years. And we'll talk about receivers here in a little bit. Because, they had Justin Ross and T. Higgins for the 2 years prior, and they were so talented on the outside. This year, so much of it's attack the middle, attack the safeties, attack the linebackers.
And I think probably the biggest thing that they are looking at right now is they're probably focusing the most attention to the Indiana game, because that's where Ohio State had its biggest issues dealing with the middle of the field.
Right.
And it seems like that's especially how after last year's game went, that's probably going to be their thought process, their attack plan coming into this game.
And you would almost have to think Ohio State. I mean, that's got to be where, you got to try to eliminate that as best as you can. So that's kind of like the scary part is you had all these issues with the deep safeties, supposed to be in positions that they weren't in, or that your zone wasn't working correctly against Indiana. But if you're going, last year, man to man killed Ohio State's defense against Trevor Lawrence, because that's when he started picking them apart when their backs were turned.
Yeah. So then the question is,
They're not picking them apart.
Where does Ohio State? How does Ohio State defend it? Did they try to maybe do a 2 deep? Because the 2 deep, they tried to do some 2 deep last year and it didn't work, at different times. Do they?
You got to have eyes on him. That's
so. Do we play a zone?
Yeah.
And then just hope to God that Proctor and or Hooker are ready for that and not are coming up trying to make a play when they need to stay into a zone.
Well, you got to mix it up, because neither one of them have shown me that they have that awareness to them that they can't try to jump the play. So I think you got to mix it up to give them different looks, but you can't continuously go man to man, because we saw it last
year. Yeah. Now kind of like just on Justin Fields, just real quick. I think the biggest thing that could be working to Ohio State's advantage and his advantage is that, Ohio State could throw something at Clemson that Clemson's just not ready for. Now, granted, you don't got your normal bowl preparation season.
Yeah.
You don't have your 4 weeks. You only had 11 days to begin with. So it's, a little less than 2 weeks. So they can't do a complete rechange of everything, but they could do some stuff, you figured the challenge, you figure Clemson will probably be in a zone against him.
Yeah, I would think so. They're not, they're going to try to, keep everything in front of them.
So I think the biggest thing is, Fields, I think where they could hurt Clemson is, find deep openings in the middle of the field against the zone. He likes to go longer. So maybe you're looking for that 15-yard range, drop somebody into a zone and then let them, do their thing.
And Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are fast enough that they can hurt those guys in yard after catch. It's just Justin Fields we haven't asked that of this team that much this year. A lot of it's been deep throws that there's not a lot of yard after catch, but Garrett Wilson's shown us on his that he can do that. Chris Olave has kind of been more like a Devin Smith, where they just kind of throw the ball to the end zone and let him do his thing.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for, ultimately for Ryan Day, but then Justin Fields too, is they're probably going to start against zone against you. You got to go against zone. You got to play zone breaking plays and break the zone. And then when they get into man to man, The one thing we haven't seen a lot this year is crossing routes. And then at that point,
Right.
you got to go. I think that's your bread and butter, and you haven't shown it a lot this year. So go with it. And,
And I'm not sure why they haven't shown this stuff as much this year. I don't know if it's coaching for Justin. I don't know if maybe, when Ryan had his hands on the quarterbacks more, Yursich was much more seasoned than what Corey Dennis is. So I don't know if there's a regression or a step back in coaching. And that's some of that he's only, I don't know if it's just him trying to win the Heisman for himself, which obviously didn't work out.
it could also be that they haven't played a lot of teams playing man to man against them,
Right.
which is,
It's just he holds the ball for a long time looking for deep passes down the field.
yeah.
And when you see that zone, you got to, you got to throw to where the opening is in the
You got to
zone.
find that where the
You got to
opening
find that
is.
soft spot. And
Yeah.
it's like they're not trying to find it. So, but what Justin does, and Trevor, like I said, Trevor's a good runner. Trevor doesn't do it a whole hell of a lot, though. Where he does, like, he's very lethal in the red zone running the ball.
Yeah.
And I've seen, and that's just, I mean, I've watched probably like 5 complete Clemson games this year. So I'm not going to say I'm an expert on anything or not, but that's where, like, he's done that a ton this year, is that, he is so hard with ETN. You got to focus on one of the two, and like bootlegs or whatever it may be, he gets a lot of touchdowns in the red zone. But if you're talking about like Justin Fields, has played 6 games, Lawrence has played 9 games because he missed the 2, and Justin Fields has 50 more rushing yards than him on the season,
Yeah.
2 less touchdowns. So Justin is more lethal and can get more on the ground than what Trevor can.
Yeah. And I think, that's definitely something, if they're in a zone, yeah, all their eyes are going to be on you. So Justin, but in both instances, Justin can run the ball.
Mhm.
You just find you get your yards that you can get against the zone. And if they go into man to man, then you kill them if you go take off on a
Right.
play. And so Justin just needs to be, especially in this game, he just needs to be more decisive with some stuff. Now, we both know what their talent on both these guys are. So, I mean, do you think the position group, is it a Clemson? This goes to the Clemson column. Is this a Buckeye position, or is this a push?
I would say just from, so let me preface this first. So I've seen Trevor Lawrence play in a couple big games. I saw him absolutely torch Alabama in 2018, and then both playoff games as a passer last year. He did not, it seemed like he had one plan, and that was to go deep and outside, and he did not seem comfortable when you got pressure on
Yeah.
him. He overthrew a lot of guys. Like, there was a lot of bad throws in both those games. And anyone can argue with me how great he is, and I understand how great he is, but he is not like, a finished product at quarterback that can just absolutely pick people apart. I saw what it looked like when people got in his face, and he still went deep, and he overthrew a lot of them.
Yeah. Joe Burrow last year, that was a quarterback that actually could pick defenses apart.
Absolutely,
And,
yes.
he used, if you're going to pressure him, then he found the hot guy.
Yeah, exactly. And he used what you gave him also. And how Clemson tried to attack him is they tried to attack Joe Burrow. And they thought that, I think they went into it. I mean, I don't know if they didn't scout those receivers or not, but they went into it almost like they thought Joe Burrow was just going to dink and dunk on them and pick them apart going down the field. And Jamar Chase and, Jefferson and Terrence Marshall, and I can't think of Randy Moss's son's first name, but they all, they went deep on them.
Yeah.
And they gashed them through the air. So yeah, I mean, I think Justin has the ability to do that, but I don't think they're going to give Justin that look. I think they're going to play like deep zones, try to keep everything in front of them. So he has to do his part, finding the soft spot in the zone. I'm sorry, like, what can he do to them?
Well, no, we're just, is this position group? Is this
Is it a pusher? I got to say Trevor Lawrence, but just by the narrowest of margins.
I'm thinking probably you're right on that, but I'm probably gonna go with my heart here and not with my brain. And at least I hope my brain's this way too. But I think it's a push. I think we know what both these guys can do, because I felt it was a push last year.
Mhm.
The final interception wasn't Justin Fields' fault.
It was a good throw.
It was a good throw. It would have been a touchdown. It would have been a game-winning touchdown as long as Olave caught it. I mean, which, he doesn't drop much. So you got to assume that there's a better chance than not, if he would have kept his route going, that he would have caught that ball.
Right.
So Fields, I mean, but Fields didn't even make bad decisions in the red zone. His one throw to Dobbins was a little hard, and if he would have just lofted it a little bit more, Dobbins would have easily have ran underneath it. And
Common sense hands on it and around it.
yeah, I mean, and then KJ Hill hit him straight in the head. I don't, KJ, I don't know
Yeah,
what
KJ that catches everything, right?
and then on the screen pass, that was all Dobbins' fault. I mean that was as perfect of a screen pass as you can have. So I feel this position's a push. I feel Fields will show up, big game, and he will show what he's all about too. And it'll be interesting. It'll be a quarterback battle.
Now, the one thing, and just to go back real quickly to the LSU game, because I recently rewatched that last year. So they went after Burrow. And Justin, this is something that I don't know if he has time to work on this now, but Burrow's pocket awareness in that game is just incredible. I mean, they're going after him, and Burrow is just doing circles in the pocket. Just, he can feel the presence. He's finding where his blockers still are. So, like Justin does, Justin doesn't like to run. He keeps his eyes downfield. But Joe is moving his feet while keeping his eyes downfield. And that's just something Justin sometimes stays a little flat footed.
Justin actually early in pressure is good with that.
Yes.
He'll move around, and then it's like, then he finally, then he breaks down.
He kind of locks in on somebody then, and then, and that's when the late blitz gets him.
Yeah.
And that's how teams, that late blitz is what Justin has trouble with.
Or the lineman that ran by him now comes up from behind him.
But you also know what they did with Joe Burrow. Joe also, he ran quick in that game when he needed to. If something wasn't there, he ran quick, and they had design draws for him.
Yeah.
Which I think, to keep them honest, like I would hate to throw plays away, but I think Ryan Day has to come out with some design quarterback runs.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I don't even know if you're necessarily throwing them away. I mean, Justin Fields is a hell of an athlete.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So, like I said, Trevor, narrowest of margins, but push for you.
Running back. So we have Etienne on Clemson. Seems like we finally have solidified the running back position for Ohio State like this after the last game, with how Sermon breaking Eddie George's all-time or the single game rush record. So last year Ohio State's defense did very well against Etienne running the ball. He didn't have any breakout runs on them running the ball. Where he killed them was as a receiver in the middle of the field. Is what you think is just a normal drop down receiver, and Trevor just destroyed them by getting it to him. So I'm assuming Ohio State still looked really good this year against the run, but he's a very multifaceted running back. So I mean, just your thoughts on where he could really do damage. I'm assuming we're both looking at that's the same as last year.
Yeah, I mean, he averages, I think, I looked it up earlier. I'm not going to look into this stuff, but running the ball, it's like 80 yards per game, I think, as long as he played in every game. Because I didn't actually look at that. I think it's about, and then it's a little bit more once you get the rush or the receiving stats in there. I think he goes for about like $125 for total yards from scrimmage. So he is a very dynamic player. Again, I think that's where he can hurt Ohio State, though, is if they're getting aggressive, going into mans, and Trevor's recognizing that quickly, and you give him a whole bunch of space to run. Because that guy, it doesn't matter what defense he's playing. Like, if he has openings, he can hit a touchdown on anybody.
Yeah.
And he can hit a 99-yard touchdown on anybody. That guy is fast. And that's something Ohio State just has to try to manage as best as they can. They got to, if you're going to give that to him, you got to have guys around him to be able to tackle him.
What it seemed like what they did really good last year in the playoff game against him when he was taking handoffs is they made sure they hit him in the hole, and then they made sure then they got to him. So he couldn't break off a tackle.
Every year that I hear that Travis Etienne has put on more muscle, he's harder to tackle, and every year I see him against when he plays a good tackling team, he struggles to break tackles. If you get your body on him and wrap him up, you can get him down. Now, where they would struggle at, though, is I saw a lot of bad tendencies this year early from Ohio State that they were trying to tackle with their shoulders.
Yeah.
Travis Etienne will bounce off those and go for touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he can get his footing back when you hit him. I've seen him do that a ton of times. So that's something, I mean, you got to wrap him up. You have to tackle properly, but if you get your body on him, he's not that strong. I mean, I don't know. I hope I'm not jinxing anything. Now, I wouldn't be surprised, though, in this game. Wisconsin's running back, Jonathan Taylor last year.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
blanked on his name. So Jonathan Taylor, all these times he went against Ohio State and he was the best running back in the country and he never did anything. And then finally hit like a 50-yard touchdown against Ohio State last year. Might even been more, might have been a little less.
He had a good first half against the
Yes.
Buckeyes.
I would not be surprised if ETN, if there was some hole and he could take one to the house on Ohio State, just because, probability of it happening at least once.
Yeah.
But if not, then they're going to try to do it like they did last year. And Ohio State just has to be ready to play the zone on that.
Yep. And you got to watch your aggressiveness because they will run screens with him. I mean, he's deadly in the passing game. Now with Trey Sermon, on the
Master Teague.
And Master Teague, the whole, I would say we'll go into the, advantage, who's got the advantage, who's got the push. On this one, I know he ran for 331 yards, and I God hope that he has another great game with him. Right now, I think my slight advantage is going to Travis Etienne on this one, just because, we've seen him do what he does.
Career stats.
And he had a good game against Ohio State last year. It might have not been running the ball, but he scores the game-winning touchdown. He has a good game against them, against the Buckeyes defense. And I definitely think Sermon, I think there's some weaknesses in the Clemson defense that Notre Dame pushed a little bit in the first game. They pushed it early in the last game, but then they got behind. And then you can't, at a point, the running game just doesn't become a factor anymore when the other team is just scoring at will against you. So there is some advantages I think Ohio State could push Clemson. They showed it last year against Clemson, and I think some of those same weaknesses are there.
Absolutely. And I think they give Ohio State some of that opportunity as well, how their defense, how they were trying to contain Ohio State's offense last year. And I think they might do that again, where they might say, hey, we're going to let you run the ball, but we're going to use, the end zone as an extra defender. They didn't care until Ohio State really, they didn't care until Ohio State got to the 20-yard line last year.
Yeah.
And then that's where Ohio State struggled. And that was 3 field goals?
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of those, though, Ohio State should have converted for touchdowns on 2 of those.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the only one that honestly you can say Ohio State shouldn't have converted for, which I think Ryan got a little too aggressive early in the game there, was that first one. That was the only one that, they actually didn't have a touchdown pass or play.
Yeah.
The 2 drops by Dobbins, both should have been touchdowns.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, Travis. I would give him the edge or the check mark on that one because of just what he's done in his career, what we know he can do. Trey Sermon's last 2 games are kind of like outliers, but he's had big games in his career. He's getting healthy. Now, the one thing I do want to point out, though, is Clemson has a very good run defense. They're giving about 99 yards per game.
Yeah.
So Ohio State, if you look at it, and sorry, I had to do this on a napkin, but if you look at their running stats, so Indiana, they went over double what Indiana's season average was. Penn State was about 70 yards more than what Penn State gives up. Michigan State was over double what Michigan State gives up. Rutgers was right on the money. Nebraska looks like about, 50 yards more, 45 yards more. And Northwestern, they went again, over double. Almost triple what Northwestern gives up per game. So Ohio State, they've played some decent run defenses. I know it's a small sample size, but they found ways. It's not just Sermon, but they've found ways to hit on these teams.
Yeah. It's definitely, Clemson definitely has a good run defense.
And I don't think Clemson, sorry to cut you off, I don't think Clemson is, I don't think they're that athletic and great once you get past that defensive line.
Outside of Notre Dame, I don't know how many. I haven't watched a lot of ACC this year. I know UNC wasn't bad running the ball. Miami's not bad running the ball.
Virginia Tech's good running the ball, and they kept them way under their average.
And they didn't play UNC. I can't remember. I know Miami has some decent backs. I can't quite remember how they did against.
Well.
Yeah, so
the only team that really had any success and hit their season average, as far as I can think of, was Notre Dame the first time around. They ran well on.
Yeah, so that will definitely be interesting. But we do agree that just on reputation, what he's done, and we just need to see a little bit more of Sermon. I think Sermon could do something big in this game. It's just we probably need him to have somewhat of a Dobbins effort here because that kept Clemson way off on their back feet last year, how well Dobbins was running against them. And actually, kept a lot of pressure off of Fields. Like if they get to a point in this game where they can just start teeing off on Fields with how Fields holds the ball, that starts getting a little nerve wracking.
That's a problem. Now I will say though, out of the two, because they're both very good run defenses, they both have good run offenses. Out of the two, though, and this is again just eye test. I mean, I do have some of the numbers here. Ohio State runs like 70 yards more per game than Clemson does,
Mm,
but Ohio State, I mean, if you just go by eye test, they stop the run altogether much more consistently than what Clemson does. Clemson, as you alluded to, they get into a point where they start getting lopsided scores and teams got to go away from their run.
yeah. All right, so we'll go into the receivers and we'll kind of lump the tight ends a little bit in with this. So we'll just do like kind of the passing game. So Clemson definitely doesn't have the same room that they did last year.
No.
And Ohio State, arguably on paper, might have a better room, especially at the top two, especially when you look at what of Olave and Wilson. When Olave and Wilson have both been on the field together, they've been unstoppable this year. And it sounds like we're getting Olave back. So, and so you would think Ohio State could do something. Especially, they didn't do bad in the passing game last year in this game, especially when they were outside of the red zone. Um, so your thoughts on Clemson first. What do you think?
So Amari Rogers is a special slot receiver, but I'm they have another guy that he's a big play guy, Cornell Powell, which he's not he's not huge. Like he's not a very tall guy, or he doesn't have the same body as like a T. Higgins or Justin Ross. He's shorter like Amari Rogers is. However, he hits huge plays. That's what Trevor Lawrence feasts on. So I mean, I would take either one of them just for production purposes. I would say, I would take Olave or Garrett Wilson. I think Garrett Wilson's a better slot receiver. I think Olave is a better receiver than Powell. However, this one kind of goes to the quarterbacks as well. That's like what Trevor Lawrence, where Ohio State's weakness has been in the middle of the field with that slot cornerback, Marcus Williamson, Marcus Hooker on the deep, back safety. So I think there's a good chance that Amari Rogers can exploit what Ohio State does. However, if we're talking straight head to head, then I mean, I think room wise, Clemson uses a lot more of their guys.
Yeah.
So that gives them an edge with some of it because they use their guys more than what Ohio State does. Ohio State, they zero in on Olave and Wilson, but they're open so much that Fields feels comfortable going to them. So I think if you go like talent wise, what the guys have, if you kind of take that part away, who uses more of what they have, I think you got to give the edge to Ohio State. I'm not going to say it's huge, significant though.
Yeah.
I think they are a much better receiving team, or they're a better receiving team than what Clemson has. Now, tight ends, again, I would go Jeremy Ruckert. I would put him against any tight end in the country and think he's fine. Or, Luke Farrell. I think they're fine. Now, Galloway, though, he does a lot of good things for Clemson because, as we mentioned earlier, Trevor's so good hitting those RPOs right over the middle of the field.
Yeah. And also, I think we have to remember that Brian Hartline wasn't coaching last game. And I don't know who Clemson's wide receiver coach is. He could be very good. I just think we have the best wide receiver coach in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, it's night and day what our receivers were a few years ago compared to what they've been the last couple of years. And I know everybody kind of focuses on Hartline's recruiting, which is, been unmatched the last couple of years. But I mean,
and that's not a stretch. I mean, it's been unmatched.
He's a damn good coach too. I mean, our guys run a lot crisper routes. They run, they do different types of routes. They do double moves. They don't just try to use their speed to necessarily get open down the field. They're doing different things. So I think the edge is with Ohio State here. It's just like kind of what you said. Can Fields get them the ball? And he has proven all year except one game that he can't. Even in the Indiana game,
he threw for 300 yards.
He was getting the ball to people.
Right.
He had a couple bad throws that turned into interceptions, and supposedly that was his worst game of his career. Well, we saw what his worst game of his career looked like.
Yeah,
it was last week against Northwestern. I don't think we're going to have a repeat of that. It's just and if your guys aren't open, can you find the other guys? And because somebody will be open, there's always somebody open. So
right.
But I would give the room itself, I would give it a advantage to Ohio State. I do think that they are the better room. And I think outside of Alabama, Olave and Wilson are the best receiving core in the
Oh
country.
yeah,
And Alabama and them would be a push, in my opinion, even with how good. Maybe I would give it if Judy was still there, or is it
Waddle that got hurt this year.
Judy is the one who got
Judy
drafted.
left.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if Waddle was still there, maybe I would give it to Alabama as the advantage because we haven't seen some of the other guys really, step up yet.
Right.
You know, but just those two, I think they easily have the advantage over Clemson. So,
I agree.
all right, the line. So, Ohio State's line, I think, I think they've been a lot better pass protection this year than a lot of people give them credit. I would say almost 2/3 of the sacks
Or on Justin.
is on Justin
Or Harry Miller. And I'm sorry, Harry, I don't want to throw you under the bus there, but
I was a little concerned with them run blocking, but then I saw last week's game.
I mean, their run blocking's been fine.
And
Yeah,
but
they're fine run blocking.
They were
fine against Indiana. They were fine against Michigan State. They're fine.
But they just looked like a even different line. They were like a possessed line last week. And, because a lot of Sermon did a lot of things, but Sermon had some big holes coming out of the.
I mean, Sermon, though, yeah, no, he had some big holes for sure, but yards after contact, he had like almost 200 yards after contact also, or something, maybe $150, something like that.
Oh, once it gets past, once you get to that point, yeah, that's on you.
That run game in general last week was on a different level.
I mean, the line gets you to the hole. They get you the first 5 yards the line gets you, and then it's the running back's job to get you the what's next. So
yeah.
So running blocking, I mean, they looked really, really good. The biggest concerns this year has definitely been Harry Miller. He started off fine. He's had some shaky play, but he looked good last week.
It's just the holds. Honestly, like that's a lot of my frustration with Harry is getting the penalties that get us behind the sticks then. Especially on touchdowns.
And you can't do that against Clemson. That was the one he did have the big hold on. I mean, who knows what that game ends up being against Northwestern.
If you score if you get a touchdown instead of a field goal.
You don't know where, how that handles momentum. Everything that could change an entire game. I mean, you can never assume everything is exactly the same if something's different. So,
right.
But outside of that, that's probably the one weak spot on. And it's just that he needs game reps, and this has again been a bad year. He didn't play a lot last year. This has been a bad year to, think that you're going to become a starter and trying to gel. When we've talked about this at the beginning of the year, the biggest things, the advantages for offensive lines are just how they gel with each other, because, you're five guys that have to literally move as one.
Well, and Harry last year, he did not get a ton of meaningful reps. Like, he got enough game time that he's not a red shirt this year. But Harry also, if you don't remember, he was not an early enrollee.
Yeah, that's true too.
He got with the team in the summer. Yeah. So he was a little bit in just how these guys are. So, I mean, you talk about this year, what got taken away from them. He's really only had, year and a half in mixed.
Yeah, he's only had
mixed program.
He only had one true.
If that,
he hasn't had any springs, and then he's only had one true summer, and that was
one true summer camp,
and that was last year.
Because I mean, this year, I mean, all those guys weren't allowed to work out the way that they normally do.
Yeah.
So,
Clemson's offensive line. So, I mean, Jackson Carman's
Jackson Carman.
He's the anchor.
Yeah.
But they have some rawness in other spots of the line. I mean, I know they throw up there that, they've had all these starts together, but then you see the breakdown, Jackson Carman has, it seems like the majority of those starts.
Well, most of those guys have like 12 starts together. They're like Ohio State's 14 offensive line, but I mean, right now they're not as impressive as where Ohio State's 14 offensive line was at this point of the season.
Yeah.
So I think after a couple years, they're all going to gel together. The thing I've noticed about the two teams, so Clemson has given up less sacks than Ohio State. I'm pretty sure on that, because Ohio State seems like they give up a lot.
And it never seems like Lawrence gets sacked.
No, the thing though that I've noticed is Clemson gives up a lot of early pressure up the middle. So I think they're pretty soft with their guards and center, and Tommy Togiai and Haskell Garrett, they're kind of our bread and butter right now on that defensive line. So I definitely think that's a point where we can have an advantage.
Definitely.
So, I mean, without having to analyze the offensive line to death, I'm going to say Ohio State would get my edge on this because what they do, I mean, they are a good pass protecting team. They're an excellent run block team. And I don't think Clemson is where they need to be right
No.
now.
Yeah, I would give the edge to Ohio State on this one too, just because, like you said, I think the weakness is in the middle. And right now, we have one. Harry Miller is our one weak spot. I think that our defensive tackles could exploit both their guards and their center,
Mhm.
and so I would give the edge to Ohio State as well on this one. So we'll reverse to the other side of the field to the defensive line. So just your general thoughts on Clemson. They've had a very good reputation over the years of having a stout defense line, just like Ohio State. They have some good younger players on
Yeah.
that line. Just your general overall thoughts, and how do you think that they're going to attack? I mean, obviously, we assume that Harry Miller is the one that is circled.
So they are very talented on their defensive line. Brian Bressie, Miles Murphy, Tyler Davis. They got a lot of players there. Assuming everyone's healthy, they're really good. As you mentioned, though, some of the best pieces are really young, also. So, I think they're going to do different stuff. I don't know if necessarily they're going to think Bressie can just go maul Harry Miller and get by him like that. I mean, maybe he could because he's a very strong guy also. So, I mean, the kid, he's a freshman. He plays like he's a junior. Like he,
Yeah,
he is incredible. And so is Miles Murphy. But I don't know if that's going to be what they're going to do. I think they're going to do some delayed blitzes at Harry. They're going to come with like two guys in the gap, make him choose between people, see if they can confuse him like that. I don't think though, just man on man, they're going to win more battles than they won't. And I could be wrong because, like I said, he's been a little shaky at the left guard spot at different times, but I think he can handle himself. But that's going to be a challenge.
no,
And then, and as good as our offensive line is, that defensive line, again, some spots that are really good are really young though, but they're super talented there, and they've done a hell of a job in most of their games.
no,
So I take nothing away from them. I don't think they're pushovers. I don't think they're overrated, anything like that. They're a legit defensive line, and that's going to be an interesting battle.
yeah. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna say, to me, right now, I think where our advantage is definitely the defensive tackles. Now, because Lawrence hurt us so much coming up into the pocket, and whether
Mhm.
he takes off for that big run where he scores on the touchdown, or just hitting an RPO, hitting Travis Etienne in the middle somewhere. I mean, he just dashed us coming up. I mean, our defense ends. I mean, a lot of people when it come and say Trey. I mean, I've heard too many people say Chase Young didn't show up in that game. Chase Young was almost got to Lawrence how many different
It was
times,
like 3 times he almost got to him.
and that's where you need the defensive tackles to calm. You need your defensive tackles to be waiting for
Right.
somebody like that. Now,
But I mean, you gotta penetrate too as a defensive tackle,
now
though.
how it'll be interesting to see how Ohio State does it. Do they try to just bring the pressure with the defensive tackles, and then can Lawrence get to the outside and hurt Ohio State, or does Ohio State try to do something a little different? And here's something I was thinking of: maybe blitz Lawrence from the outside. I mean, give the defensive ends a little bit more oomph by bringing a blitzer with them to the outside. And then as he comes up, which his natural tendency is to come up, and you have Togiai and Haskell Garrett
Yeah.
waiting for him.
I think you're going to see some of that again, though, is just how quickly Lawrence can diagnose and he can hit where that blitzer was. So, but we saw it twice last year. Sean Wade got to him, Baron Browning got to him.
No,
Now, Sean, of course, unfortunate as it was, but the blitzes, I mean, they can work on him. It's
no,
just again, you gotta disguise it. You can't, give too much. You can't show him too much pre-snap of what you're doing
yeah, exactly.
because he will get someone there and he'll kill you by
Yes.
doing that. So you got to make it a surprise. But I think Ohio State can do that, and absolutely, yeah, I think they'll try to do that. I mean, if that guy doesn't get to him, then that will force him up into the arms of Garrett and Toge, which are both very strong, and they can get past those interior linemen. They'll
No,
be there waiting for him.
no. So I'm right now even. I want to say that I'm going to give this a slight Ohio State advantage just because where I like the defensive tackles. I've been back and forth between, is this a push versus a slight advantage. And right now, I'm going to say slight advantage just because I think Clemson's youth hurts them a little bit right now until we see more.
Yeah.
If they can rise to the big game, to the challenge. And I've loved with our defense, especially Haskell Garrett, but Togiai too. I mean, both these guys have been just wrecking balls to be dealing with, and no interior line has shown that they can handle them
Right.
this year.
I mean, not significant, not slight, just full advantage Ohio State on this one. They got more experience on the defensive line. I know they don't have
That too.
they don't have Chase Young there. Um, but these guys have been a mixed program. They've played against stronger guys for a longer period than what these freshmen for Clemson has. So these guys are good. Don't get me wrong, and they're going to make some plays in this game, but throughout the course of the game, I just think it favors Ohio State. And it's not like crazy. Like I said, it's not significant, but it's also I don't think it's just like, barely ahead of them. I think they're ahead of them.
Yeah. All right, linebackers. So I think this is eh, unlike some other years. I think this is the year that it doesn't seem like Clemson has,
But they just like us, they have a very experienced room.
yeah, they have an experience room. It is weird like that because they don't have that guy, but at the same time, I don't see necessarily do they have any weaknesses to their linebackers. Are they?
I don't
I mean, Ohio State, but that's how I would describe Ohio State. Even with Ohio State, I think because we look at Ohio State more, so it's easier for us to pick out their
yeah.
weaknesses. But I would think as an outsider, you'd be like, they don't have any. Do they really have anybody? But they don't have any. But they're not bad neither. So
I mean, if you look at top end talent, what you can do, you would say Baron Browning's the best linebacker in the game.
yeah, I would agree with
But it
that.
doesn't play out like that a lot of the time for Barron. So I mean, I would say Skalski and Borland. I mean, that's a push, right? Is Skalski any more athletic than Tough Borland is?
No, I would agree with
I mean,
that.
they're both great run stoppers.
Yeah,
Skalski's more vocal, obviously. Tough's a much more subdued guy, but
yeah,
I think I don't see how one's really better than the next. I don't
yeah,
think one's more athletic than the next. I mean, Spector and Warner, those are like clones of each other. I think
yeah,
again, they do everything right, but neither one's like, a top 10 player,
yeah,
top 10 draft pick. I don't even know if they have a third linebacker or who they typically use. I mean, Baron Browning, Justin Hilliard have both looked good this year. So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Clemson, it's like they don't do a lot wrong,
yeah.
but they're not flashy this year. They don't got that, Isaiah Simmons that can go all over the field and do everything for them.
Yeah. Now, I would love to see can Ohio State's backers outside of the Indiana game where even though I think a lot of those issues were more on the safety, but they did kind of fall back into some of their old tendencies. Now,
A lot of that was on Williamson and the safety though.
agreed. Last year against Clemson, I think the biggest thing that made us nervous is that we felt for the whole year the linebackers were back to Ohio State linebackers, and then the Clemson game you started seeing,
Then they weren't.
there's some of their old tendencies come out. It seems like they've gotten better again this year when teams have challenged them against that type of stuff. Now this is for this is for everything now. So
Right.
are they ready to be? Because the thing with linebackers, no one's ever going to accuse a linebacker to be able to cover, a receiver, in man-to-man coverage. Tight ends even have usually advantages. The whole point about linebackers is just being in your correct positions and make a quarterback make a throw over a linebacker.
So Browning can cover, Warner can cover, Hilliard can cover. We've seen all that. Tufts actually he can be hit or miss sometimes in the pass game as far as being in the lanes. So that's a lot of still the issues that I've seen with them is they don't make throws difficult over the middle. That's been a lot of what I've seen now the linebackers. They've gotten better though. They
Yeah,
have gotten better. They are improved. I don't know how difficult they make those throws over the middle though, and you need to.
yeah,
And I mean, but look at last year, the first drive of the game, Trevor Lawrence almost gets picked off by Tough Borland because Tough
yeah.
read where he was going. He just didn't catch the ball.
And that's kind of always been my issue, especially with this linebacker. Because when you think about like especially some of the middle linebackers Ohio State have had, and I'm just going to go back to just Wilhelm. I mean, when you think of Wilhelm and Schlegel and Laurinaitis, and then uh y- Curtis Grant and McMillan were kind of like
I
that.
don't know if you would say Tough Borland's worse than Curtis Grant, though.
It seemed like it seemed like, especially after Meyer got there, Curtis Grant he was a little bit better in the passing game than what he was starting. And then
Yeah.
he at least made the thing with those middle linebackers, you got to get back into those lanes and just make it difficult. And it seems like all those guys, I mean, I remember them all, every one of those guys named, I remember them getting hands up and, tipping balls. And, sometimes I think Tough's gotten better with it. It's just, it's never been Tough's game. He's definitely been you know, uh, he comes up, he's great against run teams, and he's gotten a little bit better against pass teams, but it's just, watching last year's game does make me nervous to what, especially you would think that that's definitely going to be their thought processes they're going to exploit there. That's going to be right from the get go. Let's see if this middle of this defense can hold up against us.
They're going to try, and they may be able to exploit it. I don't know. I have confidence in our linebackers. They've played well this year. They've been better than not. Almost, they've been good to above good for
Yeah.
most of the season.
Agreed.
So I think they did play a bad game. They played a bad game against Northwestern. Warner and Tuff did.
Yeah.
So that one, I mean, that's a little worrisome, but I don't know. I think they know what's going to try to get thrown at them. Of course, again, Lawrence and that offense, they have a lot of different things they can throw at you, but I think Ohio State will come into it with a good plan, and I'm going to bet on the linebackers that they can at least make it difficult. I'm not saying they're going to pick Lawrence off because he doesn't throw a lot of interceptions.
So would you say, is this Clemson Buckeyes or is this a push?
I would say push. Now, go back to Lawrence doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. What I did notice about Trevor Lawrence threw, I think it was 4 interceptions this year. So it's not a lot because, he had 9 games, so it wasn't anything crazy. He does have a habit, though, that, like I said, I think he has his mind made up when the ball gets snapped because they're mostly all to the middle of the field. And he stares guys down. And that's who gets him are linebackers and safeties. The ones that intercepted. So, I mean, again, Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback in college football, but he's not like, he's not Tom Brady coming into the NFL.
Yeah.
There are still weaknesses in his game that he has to improve on. So I'm going to say push on this one.
No, I agree with you. I'm going to go push that one.
But Ohio State's linebackers may be a little bit more athletic than Clemson's.
Yeah. Secondary. Now, before I get into my thoughts on the secondary, I've seen a lot of stuff this week on different Facebook boards that I'm on, plus some things on Twitter that, Clemson's just going to hand us though, because our secondary has played bad all year. And our secondary has been nowhere near as bad this year as what it was in 2018. And I don't know where some of that, I mean,
Yeah.
I get it. The middle has had some issues, but even our safeties have played better the last few weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Proctor, he had a tough start against Northwestern, but he had a good second half. And, Hooker, before, getting COVID, he was fine after the Indiana game.
Right.
They fixed a lot of the stuff that, the issues that it seemed like they had. I don't think our secondary is as bad or as weak as some people are making it out to be. I think we've been fine at cornerbacks. Our cornerbacks really haven't been, there's been a couple. I mean, Sean gave up a couple great catches. He maybe had one or two bad that was more on him. In some of those early games, touchdowns.
Well, he had an effort one against Penn State,
but he had some big interceptions now coming down the stretch.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's had a pick 6. Seven Banks has not given up that much all year. Like
no, the one that really surprised me on 7 was that the opening drive of that third quarter, Northwestern beat him on that kind of like that fade route.
Yeah,
that they did. So that one surprised me about him, but he's had a very decent year. I mean, Sean's had a good year. And you can say what you want that Sean gave up. Indiana hit some amazing plays. Like most of Penix's 500 yards through the air came on 5 passes in that game. Like, so tip your hat to those guys. Sean they had a couple bad plays in that game.
Yeah, I haven't watched a lot of full games Clemson, but I've watched some early games of Clemson this year. A couple things I've noticed about Clemson's, especially their corners, that if a team could hold up against Clemson's barrage, their offensive barrage,
Yeah.
I think their cornerbacks could be a liability. And I think the Buckeyes are a team that could hold up
I've seen
against their barrage because
right. And sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm getting fired up on the subject, but like you're saying, like I agree. I don't think like Clemson secondary, their cornerbacks, you can get by them. I've seen it a lot this year, and I've seen a lot of bad throws from opposing quarterbacks that they didn't even necessarily have a lot of pressure in their face or anything, that they just overthrew the receivers. Like I've seen it a lot this year, just like you're saying that they can get beat at times.
yeah.
I don't think like Nolan Turner is probably their best guy on their secondary. He's out for the first half.
Yeah, that's
And I still think just like Tanner Muse last year, and I don't want to like insult the guy. I mean, Tanner Muse did fine too, but I think Nolan Turner athletically, he has some limitations to himself as well.
yeah. I mean, that's just what I've noticed is that I think our outside corners are better than theirs.
I think our secondary is better than that.
And they're like, I mean, I'm a little nervous about where we are at safety. I will say that every game. I do think our safeties have played better, but we'll see when they play a real team. They're playing a real team.
Yeah.
So I mean, there could be some threats there, but I think Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave could have a big game against these guys.
I agree. And again, they don't have Isaiah Simmons running around that field
and
either.
it's just like I said, the problem with the ACC teams, I've seen some ACC schools challenge them. It's just you can't keep up with the scoring barrage that Clemson can throw at you. Well, Ohio State's built to do that. So, this could be a game where that liability as those corners could hurt them in the fourth quarter, and Ohio State could win a game because of that. And
Ohio State's shown me a lot of times that they can put it on their running game too when they need to. I mean, that is the biggest problem when you go against Clemson is if you watch a lot of their games are very close in the first quarter, which I mean, a lot of games anywhere are close in the first quarter.
Yeah.
You've only been playing for 15 minutes. So not everybody's like Ohio State, that jumps all over people in the first and second quarters. But if you watch a lot of Clemson games, you'll see that a lot of times it is close, like really close early on, where they might even look like they're at a disadvantage. But then Lawrence just lights people up like 2-3 series in a row, and then a team has to become one-dimensional out of it.
I mean, going off of that, I mean, a lot of times people try to overjudge first quarters too much. I mean, first of all,
you got a lot of game left.
You're always playing scripted plays early, and you don't know exactly what the other team is doing. Everybody has their special plays that they've brought out just for this game, and it takes usually a defense, a seasoned defense like an Alabama or a Clemson or Ohio State. It usually takes them a couple series to really get into the game because the coaches need to see what's going on.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's the one thing that I've really felt that because I see their weaknesses in their secondary, and I think if you can keep up with their scoring and not let them just manhandle you, that's where the running game, Ohio State's running game could still be a factor in the second half, which Clemson really doesn't have to play ever.
Yeah.
And then that just makes those two receivers even more deadlier because, now you got to make that decision. Are you bringing a safety up or are you not bringing a safety up? Who are you trying to help here? Are you trying to stop Trey Sermon or are you trying to stop Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave?
Right.
And so, yeah, I think I'm a little nervous about the safeties, and that's why I'm closer to making this a push. But I think I'm going to go slight advantage Ohio State just because I like our two outside corners better than I like their outside corners. And now, as we saw last year, that might not mean everything because I liked our outside corners dominated the game last year. If you went just off of what the outside corners did in the game, you would have thought we easily won the game because, their two outside receivers did nothing against, Okuda and Damon Arnett. And so...
No, I know. And that's like, yeah, I know that's rough because where they said that it was going to be like, hit or miss, like they're going to win some, we're going to win some. Like we hardly lost any of those battles. I mean, Damon Arnett and Jeff Okuda, they shut those guys down on the outside. It's just, they killed us with those huge plays in the middle of the field. I am going to say push just because I agree. I think outside corners, we can beat them there, but I still think middle of the field, they could probably beat us there.
Yeah.
Now with Nolan Turner out in that first half, though, That's interesting to me. I don't know. Are they going to try to get Garrett Wilson vertical and attack that safety?
I mean, they should try.
I mean, I guess it depends how deep they're playing too, though.
Yeah, I mean, if they're gonna give a if if they're only playing a one deep and attack him, if they have maybe if they're playing a cover two, cover three, even a quarters, you take every you have to take whatever situation they give you, and they'll probably play at different styles, defenses to protect the back end. But
So you agree, flea flicker first play of the game?
it could work. I mean,
I've been harping on this. Trey Sermon just had 331 rushing yards. They have a backup safety in there. Flea flicker, first play of the game. Garrett Wilson down the center of the field, touchdown.
I think where Ohio State could really separate themselves in this game is that stay in this game early. Don't let them start beating you down, because that keeps your running game into it. And if that keeps your running game into it, I think Sermon will get his, and then they could really dominate these cornerbacks
Mhm.
with our receiving core playing the play action game. And then I don't know, then could be very interesting.
It
Could
could
be a
be.
very happy night at the end of the night. We'll quickly touch on the secondary a little bit. I mean, Ohio State, even this year, they still haven't kicked the ball that much. It's like they never. Like,
Yeah.
I like Blake Cowbill. I'm not really sure in Clemson who Clemson's kickers are, but it
Oh, BT
seems
Potter.
okay.
He's good.
He's good.
They're both good. I mean, and both punters are good.
Yeah. Seems like Chrisman's going to be still out, correct? But the guy last week, he seemed like he was.
Hoover.
Yeah.
I didn't know Chrisman is still going to miss.
I heard that they were the least optimistic about him being back. So
That's hard. But
I heard
knows,
his.
Hoover?
I heard his might actually have been an injury and not so much COVID. But
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, hopefully he's. I don't know. I mean, Hoover, that scares you. Walk on punter in that situation, but maybe you don't got to kick it a lot. Who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe it's a really good night and you're not punting all that often.
yeah. I'm gonna say push. I'm not gonna pretend like I've watched a lot of Clemson's kickers, but I know that Potter is a good kicker. Blake Cowbill is a good kicker, and I saw enough from our punter last week in a championship game that he at least he showed up.
Yeah.
And, if he does have to play, he has to play, and he did fine. So I think that's a push. So Dabo versus Day. So just your general thoughts. I mean, I mean, I'll be honest. I'm gonna go slight Dabo as the
Experience
coach.
and titles.
So he beat us head to head last year, and I think Ryan Day, even though there was some stuff that was there, he had some good calls in the red zone. He had some bad calls in the red zone too. And I mean, at the end of the day, that falls on him.
Yeah.
So, but just your general thoughts.
Well, I'm interested because the Northwestern game, I think a lot of us came out of that like that was Ryan Day's worst play calling game as a coach at Ohio State. And then I kind of looked at it. I try to be a little bit more optimistic about it. Like Ryan Day was getting beat. Like I don't know why he was calling things the way he was. They weren't working. He found something that worked though. And I mean, it took him a long time to get to it, but once he got to it, he ran the ball down Pat Fitzgerald's throat, which
Yeah.
doesn't happen often. So I agree. I give the edge to Dabo in a game, but I think Ryan Day has matured a lot. I mean, I kind of like his play calling. I think kind of hurt us in that first Clemson game when we got to the second half too.
Yeah.
That we did fine in the first half. We just couldn't convert. In the second half, it was just kind of a weird game how it played
It
out.
seemed like he tried to get a little too conservative too early in that game, and that's kind of been sometimes. Now, it's one thing to make that argument when you're up, 5 scores in the first half.
Yeah.
Like we are against some Big Ten teams. I mean, some people have said that maybe he gets a little too trustless in the second half, which could be true.
Yeah.
But you're just playing numbers. You're playing advantages then, and maybe you would like early in the second half to come out and maybe if you throw maybe another 2-3 touchdowns out, just that was always kind of Urban's philosophy. Is like Urban would really start the real conservativeness in the fourth quarter. Normally, it was always like, I'm gonna make sure this game is won,
Right.
and then I will start. Maybe we'll just run the ball. I mean,
Yeah.
even though that was a lot of their offense to begin with, but it was run at a much faster pace, and
I mean, yeah, I agree. I think though, at the end of the day, I think Day is a better play caller and
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think he could exploit Dabo Sweeney and Venables, if opportunity presents itself. So I think he's had some rough spots with play calling. Like you said, he gets conservative sometimes a little too easily, but
And this has been a rough year. This has been a rough year for. I mean, I know he coached some games the previous year from last year, but last year was his first year as a head coach. He was flying high. He was the new man on campus. Everybody loved him, and this year, you had a lot of stuff to deal with, and he hasn't had a lot of playing time. He's basically running, he's ran a very vanilla offense this year. And maybe he might try to, I'm wondering if he will try to snap out of that a little bit
I hope
and try to
so.
break some of his tendencies. Oh, but like I said, what worries me is what can you really install in 11 days? It's not like, but I think he can install some stuff that, you're breaking tendencies and that,
Yeah.
maybe just show a couple different formations and, make Clemson just have to think a little bit more about different stuff. And even if you're running the same plays that you're running out of those formations, just
I'm just part of me, and I don't think it'll happen because in the Northwestern game, he gave the keys to Trey. I mean, maybe that's because it didn't get out of hand. Also, part of me gets scared though. We might see like an '06 Florida game where that's just their offense is so predicated about going vertical, and they try it so much, and it's just not working.
yeah.
But I don't know. I don't see that happening though. I think if he goes a couple series, it's not working. We'll run the ball. I think we'll probably get a good dose of running from probably the second series on. I do think he's going to come out and try to establish a pass against them just to get Justin in a rhythm, hitting, short
And
passes,
I,
maybe go deep early.
I think that's important too. I think that's just try to. I think the biggest thing is you got to try to get Justin into the game, but for some reason, if it's not working, you got to get to the running game a lot quicker than he did against Northwestern because you know it proved against Northwestern. From early in the game, it was working. It was just that he wasn't willing to make that full switch until
Yeah.
later in the game. And then when he made the switch, you knew they were going to win. It was just that Trey Sermon wasn't being stopped, and Northwestern's defense looked like they said uncle that they were done.
Right.
That Ohio State was just manhandling them. So I now both Dabo and Day have both given out some bulletin board material. So like
Yeah. I mean,
they've matched each other on bulletin
but
board.
Day didn't try to.
Yeah, I know.
Day did his in a locker room.
Still got out, and damn it, Demario.
Yeah. Thanks to Mario.
That but Dabo. I mean, that was dumb on his part, in my opinion. I mean, just to try to double down. Well, I don't think because they've played so little games. I mean, at this point, if you don't think like, what are you if like as a coach, if I was a coach, I would be more worried about like what Dave's worried about that they haven't had enough reps. And
Right.
like if I was Dabo, I'd been like, okay, this team they've looked sloppy at different parts this year. We could exploit that because they haven't had reps. And,
Yeah.
but he's looking at it from the other side of it. That
Well, he's saying their legs are fresher,
yeah,
which I mean, yes and no. I mean, you build that stuff up, but you got to remember guys like Josh Myers. Josh Myers wasn't allowed to do anything for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't allowed to stay active. That doesn't keep your legs fresh. Like you get sore, you get worn down easier. So, I mean, that was their whole offensive line pretty much had to go through that. So
Yeah.
I don't think he's right when he says that they have fresh legs because you still got to be active. You
Yeah.
can't, you can't let your muscles just like not work them out anymore.
I wish some of you reporters would call some of these coaches out.
Call him out on his BS. Like, and the thing is, like, these guys have actually played the game before, like your Pollocks and Herb Streets. Like, just say it how it is that nobody would want to play less games and go into a situation like that.
Like you're playing. I mean, there's 3 legitimate teams, especially 2 really legitimate teams, and Notre Dame's good too. I mean, these guys they've played a full season with each other, or close to a full season, and Ohio State hasn't.
Well, what did I say earlier? I said, they've played sloppy Clemson at the beginning of games. It's been close. They figured stuff out, but they always figure it out and they always beat the crap out of everybody outside of the Notre Dame game. So
Yeah.
wouldn't you rather be in the position of them that you saw some things that didn't work, and were able to, fix it and win a game big? Whereas Ohio State's had 6 games.
Yeah.
And some of them's been really bad second halves. Some of them much better second halves.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll get into later on the show, our actual pregame show, that our thoughts about who's going to win the game and stuff like that. But just anything else in general you want to throw out for today?
No, I think it's going to be a good game, though. I mean, if you actually look at it, Clemson throws for more than Ohio State does. Ohio State runs for more than Clemson does. Defenses, I think Ohio State gives up about 60 more yards per game than what Clemson does. So the defenses aren't terrible. Like Ohio State, they're not some terrible defense like people think. They both get like 25 first downs a game. They both have about one takeover per game or turnover. I think Ohio State has a couple more takeaways per game. So
Yeah.
again, though, it's hard. Like when you go about sample size, if Ohio State played more games, I'm sure that number comes down a little bit. So
Yeah, exactly.
I think they're much more evenly matched up than what a lot of people are thinking. I mean, if your entire thing is Clemson's going to kill Ohio State because Marcus Hooker isn't the best deep safety out there, you might be like really disappointed by the end of this because
Yeah.
I mean, Justin Fields is a great quarterback. Justin
Yeah.
Fields can play against any defense in the country. It's just kind of like putting it all together. But if you think that if that's the one thing that you're going to hang your hat on, and you think that Trevor Lawrence is just going to beat Marcus Hooker down the field every play, he might be trying to beat Josh Proctor down the field, which
Yeah.
Josh played a good second half last week.
We got better play calling than we did in 2016. So I don't see there's no 2016 in this. We do have a better secondary than we did in 2018. So I don't see that necessarily in this. We have an offense that can score. So I'm not really,
Yeah. And anybody that wants to say about like 2018 and 2013, yeah. I mean, 2018's defense wasn't good, but they only lost one game.
yeah.
2013's defense had issues. 2013, Ohio State legitimately could have won the national title in 2013.
I mean, like I said, this game is going to be close. This is going to be a close game.
I really believe so.
That could go either way. It could be the last team that has the ball wins this game, just like it almost was last year.
Well, and I think people are like, well, it could either be like a close Ohio State win, or it could be a close Clemson win, or it could even be a couple score Clemson win. I think Ohio State has just as much of an opportunity if things go sideways to Clemson.
I mean,
get a turn.
Very easily could.
I think Ohio State could win by 2 scores.
They very easily could have won by a few scores last year,
right?
And just weird things happen when you don't put those touchdowns in the game. Then that other stuff affects it.
And momentum hit them, and they gave up some scores on some bad plays, some bad calls.
Yeah. All right, so I think we'll get out of here today on that.
Yeah, we got to catch up on the Browns. I hope they're not getting killed yet.
Yeah.
I hope they better not be against the Jets.
Yeah, even with all their players being out. All right, so we'll sign off here.
All right, well, everybody, thank you for stopping in to the Buckeye Bar. I'm John.
And I'm Mike.
OH.
IO. Well, thank you for watching here, the Buckeye Bar guys, here on the Buckeye Bar Talk Network. Please subscribe to the network, and when you get the little notification bell, just hit that. Hit all notifications. That way you will get alerted when all the new episodes come up. Comment, like the show, and we hope you join our community. Come join our bar.
Like, comment, share. I'm John. That's Mike. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you.